It's the most devastating economic reversal in modern Western history. For 200 years, every generation of Americans and Europeans grew up richer, more prosperous, and with more opportunity than their parents. Today, that 200-year promise is dead. Millennials and Gen Z are on track to end their lifetimes 30% poorer than their baby boomer parents, even though they're the most educated generations in history, work longer hours, and hold more skilled jobs. This is the intergenerational wealth reversal, the unprecedented economic shift that shattered the core social contract of the Western world. Today, we're answering three critical questions. How did the richest nations on Earth end up with the first generation of young people poorer than their parents? What unspoken economic rules have destroyed the century-old promise of upward mobility? And how is this historic wealth collapse permanently changing our global economies, our politics, and our societies? So how did we get here? If you listen to the popular narrative, you'll hear it's all the fault of young people. We buy too many lattes, take too many luxury vacations, and refuse to get real jobs to save for a house. But that's a lie. The real origin of this crisis isn't reckless spending. It's a one-time economic golden age that the baby boomer generation got to ride, and that will never happen again. To put this in perspective, in 1970, a 25-year-old American high school graduate working a union factory job earned the 2024 equivalent of $55,000 a year. The average three-bedroom home in the US cost $24,000, less than 2 years of his salary. Today, that same home costs $416,000. The average 25-year-old college graduate earns $52,000 a year. That means the same house now costs 8 years of their salary, if they can even save for a down payment while paying $1,800 a month in rent and $300 a month in student loans. Baby boomers didn't build their wealth through sheer grit. They won the geographic and historical lottery, post-World War II reconstruction, peak union power, free or nearly free university tuition, housing prices that tracked with wages, and a global economy where Western workers had virtually no competition. That window slammed shut in the 1980s, and it's never opening again. On paper, the Western economy has never been bigger. US GDP has tripled since 1990, the Eurozone economy has doubled, but none of that growth has gone to young people. The numbers are staggering. In 1989, Americans under 35 controlled 21% of the nation's total wealth. In 2024, that number has collapsed to just 3%. In the UK, 30-year-olds today have 40% less wealth than 30-year-olds did in 2000. In Germany, the home ownership rate for under 30s has dropped from 42% in 1990 to just 19% today. Take Jake, a 32-year-old software engineer in Seattle, earning $120,000 a year. That's more adjusted for inflation than his father earned in 1992 as a union garbage truck driver. His father paid off his 4-bedroom house by age 40, raised 2 kids, put them through college debt-free, and retired at 62 with a full pension. Jake? He shares a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate, pays $2,200 a month in rent, has $18,000 in student debt, and can't save enough for a down payment on even a 1-bedroom condo. He's never been married, has no kids, and has no idea if he'll ever be able to retire. This wealth reversal isn't just about bank accounts. It's broken every part of the social contract we've relied on for a century. Marriage rates for 30-year-olds have halved since 1990. Fertility rates across the Western world have collapsed to the lowest levels in history. Startup rates for young people have dropped by 65% since 1980, and it's spawned global cultural shifts, from the FIRE movement's desperate push to escape work entirely, to the viral anti-work trend, to young people abandoning the Western world entirely to live as digital nomads in countries where their salaries actually stretch. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the economic mechanisms that created this crisis and why every attempt to fix it has backfired spectacularly. The core issue here is something economists call the financialization of Western assets, the 40-year shift where the value of housing, stocks, and real assets has exploded, while wages for working people have completely stagnated. Between 1945 and 1980, US wages grew at the exact same rate as GDP. If the economy grew, your paycheck grew. But since 1980, 100% of all economic growth in the US has gone to the owners of assets, stocks, real estate, businesses. Wages, adjusted for inflation, have barely moved. Baby boomers got to buy assets when they were cheap and watched their value skyrocket. Young people today have to buy those same assets at inflated prices with stagnant wages. It's a rigged game before you even start playing. We broke down the full history of wage stagnation in our recent video on the death of the middle class, and this crisis is the direct end result. But young people and governments didn't just sit by and watch this happen. They tried 3 major fixes, and every single one made the problem worse. First, the individual level fix, hustle culture and the side hustle boom. Young people were told if they just worked harder, got a side gig, drove for Uber, sold stuff on Etsy, they could close the gap. But instead, the flood of young people into the gig economy pushed down wages for everyone. A 2024 study found that side hustles have reduced average hourly wages for entry-level jobs by 12%. Making it even harder to save for a down payment, not easier. Second, the government-level fix. Band-aid policies that inflated the bubble further. From student loan forgiveness in the US to first-time homebuyer grants in the EU, governments tried to plug the gap with handouts. But instead, these policies just pushed up the price of the assets young people were trying to buy. When the UK introduced its Help to Buy scheme, home prices in the country jumped 22% in 3 years. When the US expanded student loan access, college tuition tripled in 20 years. The gap got bigger, not smaller. Third, the cultural fix, the minimalist movement, and the latte lie myth. Young people were told if they just cut out coffee, cancelled Netflix, and stopped traveling, they could save enough to buy a house. But a 2023 study found that even if a young American cut out all non-essential spending entirely, they would save an extra $5,000 a year. At that rate, it would take them 16 years to save for a 20% down payment on the average US home. By that time, home prices would have doubled again. It's a hopeless, impossible goal. From here on, it gets even worse. What started as a wealth gap has turned into a full-blown economic collapse for young Westerners, with no end in sight. The median net worth of a millennial household in the US is $127,000. For a baby boomer household at the same age, it was $290,000, adjusted for inflation, a 56% gap. Across the EU, 60% of Gen Z say they don't believe they will ever own a home. 72% say they will never get the same level of retirement benefits their parents have. 30% of young Europeans say they can't even afford to heat their homes in the winter, even with a full-time job. And young people are turning to extreme, controversial ways to survive. The number of Americans aged 25 to 34 living with their parents has jumped 45% since 2000, with many staying in the family home well into their 30s, relying on the bank of mom and dad just to make ends meet. Hundreds of thousands of young Westerners have abandoned their home countries entirely, moving to countries like Thailand, Mexico, and Portugal, where their salaries can actually cover a mortgage. Others have turned to high-risk, unregulated work, from online content creation to crypto day trading, desperate for a shot at the kind of wealth their parents got with a regular 9-to-5. Politically, It sparked a revolution. Young Westerners are 3 times more likely to support extreme left or right-wing parties than their parents, rejecting the mainstream economic system that failed them entirely. This generational divide is no temporary trend or passing struggle. It is a permanent economic shift, reshaping the foundation of modern society, one that will dictate growth, stability, and living standards for decades to come. The once universal promise that hard work and education guarantee a better life has vanished, replaced by a system that rewards inherited wealth and asset ownership over daily labor. Younger generations are not spending recklessly or lacking ambition. They are navigating an economic playing field stacked heavily against them, trapped between stagnant wages and endlessly rising living costs. This imbalance will slow innovation, lower birth rates, and weaken domestic demand across every Western nation. The question is no longer if this gap will widen, but whether policymakers will ever rewrite the rules to restore fair opportunity. If you've felt this quiet economic pressure in your own life, leave a like and subscribe to explore more hidden economic forces shaping our future. Our next video breaks down what governments could actually do to fix this broken generational cycle for good.